So I'll get started in our second session. Have everyone got coffee? Everyone? Me too. So I'm still recording. Probably been recording all that before, so I'll have to edit the video down. Let's see if it works, or if I may come back to you in a few slides. So somewhere very pale here, we have introduction to ggplot. This is our second session in the plotting to R. So here's the next one. Hopefully, we know now R has extensive graphic capabilities. So like I said before, we have two kind of major methods of doing this. We have base graphics, and then we have grid graphics like Lattice and ggplot2. And the difference in concept is base graphics is pen and paper. We are writing to the plot and we are over plotting as we go along. And if we want to change something, we probably have to start again. It's okay. Base graphics is very fast. If you can't see, let me know. And this is actually base R here. That's probably very quick to do, but you can see this is Lattice, which we're not going to cover, but we're about to have a whole session of ggplot2, so I thought I'd search for Lattice. And you can see what it's done is kind of broken up the data into multiple, what we would call facets, and plots all based on the same data. And I think it's actually broken it up by depth things. So the nice thing about this more advanced systems is they allow you to rapidly prototype and generate types of more complex plots, which may take you, 10, 20 minutes to put together in base graphics. So ggplot, again, a lot of people have used ggplot Ray. Does everyone know who Hadley Wickham is? Let me show you Hadley Wickham. Here's a very memorable face. Oh, interesting. So Hadley is the chief scientist at POSIT, so that's our studio. And he is probably one of the, I think there's three major people who write extensions for R. And I think him, Henrik Bergsten, Yui Shi, Hadley Wickham. We're going to cover lots of reproducible stuff by Yui later. But Hadley really has changed the face of R, and not just through ggplot2, which by far and away is his most popular package, but also through things like the tidyverse, which is ways of dealing with data frames in a slightly more intuitive way. We're not going to cover that because most manuals written for R won't necessarily cover or use the tidyverse, so we need to know base R. But we do have slides on that, and if we have time, and I invite you to go look yourself, and I think Matt has done it and recorded it at some point. But ggplot, I can tell you, is the most popular, one of his oldest, but has been so well used. And I just want to show you, this is a slightly cooler plot of him. I like this one. But he has revolutionized art and he's really changed it and made it a lot more appealing. And people are copying him in other languages, right? So there's lots of ggplot2 in Python. And some of his stuff on tidy data handling, you'll see there as well. So ggplot2 itself provides, he's got a quote on this, but we can say like this: an intuitive plotting system to rapidly generate publication quality. And it really builds on something I have never read, which is a paper by Wilkinson, but I do know the concept of the grammar of graphics, which really means you have a consistent syntax for the construction of a wide range of complex graphics. And you can do this just by a very concise description of their components. So we already saw, I showed you bar plot, and in order to change the names, I needed to use a different parameter. Right? It wasn't just called labs or something, it was names.arg. Okay, that's a pain because every different type of plot I want to do, I have to know a different parameter name. I have to know how that works. Consistent syntax means that we should be able to generate a whole range of different plots using very similar kind of setup, very similar parameters. Hopefully concise, so it should be easy to do. Again, like I say, we're not going to cover tidyverse because it's not base R and you do not need it for this class. That said, it is cool. we have a link to our materials there. I invite you to go look there or really anywhere that this is. So why do we use ggplot? It's structure, syntax, this high level of abstraction. So we're not going to need to put the axes in ourselves necessarily like we had to do and build that whole plot up in order to just make a plot where the lines fit. And we had our own labels. We actually should be able to concentrate on what we want to visualize. I want to have different shapes for different groups. I want to have different colors for different people. That should be what we're worrying about. What's the end plot look like? Not how do I spend 20 minutes to get there. I think ggplot is really going to help us. We're not concentrating on underlying code. We are in an R class. We're able to concentrate that. We concentrate on the visualization. So it aims to have increased flexibility over many plotting schemes. And I think that's more that we can use the same syntax to do many different things. It has a very advanced theme system. So I showed you this plot and it's all white in the background and we have, certain type of axis, but it's all very detailed. We can kind of change that in ggplot really easily and just cast our plots into a different style, which can, things like ggpubber, that has its own set of themes. And really you can get pretty close to professional publication. Usually every plot you need to take, I don't know, but you probably need to tidy it up in Illustrator, maybe do something there, but you're going to get pretty close. And a lot of papers just have plots. There is an incredibly large user base for ggplot. So remember what I said earlier on about pen and paper? ggplot is different, right? We kind of create an idea of that plot, kind of the components of that plot, and then when we want a plot, we just tell it to go to the screen. That means that if I made a ggplot, I can actually pass it to you, someone in this class, and you can then carry on working and updating that plot, change the colors. Right, that's great. If it was pen and paper, you just have to look at my code and change the color and remake it. In this case, I can pass you an object containing my plot, and then you can change the elements of it you want to. Right? That is why it has this large developer base, because they write their plots in ggplot2, and they know that when it comes back to the user, they don't need to think of everything. You can update the plot. Right? So, we have a few packages in the BRC. Everything's ggplot. Let's have a little look at this. So I'm not sure if we've actually seen a CRAN page. So this is a page for, I need to check what this package does actually first, because I just pulled up a random package. Too crazy. American site there. So this is a package here, and you can see that it actually, we have some slides on this as well. We don't need to know. It depends, imports, and suggests. These are packages it uses. So it loads these packages to take advantage of the functions in them. If we look here, reverse suggests, this is packages which use this package. So there's one package, Apotext. A lot of packages are never used by another package. They have the functions. But if a package creates useful things, it will be used by lots and lots of other packages. Our packages aren't used by many other things, but they are still used. Yeah, but this only has one. Right, so that means only, and I suggest by the name, Apotables and Apotext, it's the same developer. He's just relying on his own package. If we look at ggplot2, we can see that all these packages use it. Right, that's thousands. Right? They build on top of ggplot2. These depend, these import, which means one is dependent on the functionality in ggplot2. One probably just gives you options to make these plots. But that means if you learn ggplot2, all these packages, you can customize all the plots which are being generated. And this is why, the more popular it gets, the more people use it. Okay. The next point I think I'm going to make is that, ggplot2 also has a large user base. Okay, so why is that useful? It means, like we said in our issues, you're not the first person to ask the question, right? And often someone's already asked it, just go look at the issues first. I'm not sure if this is the best way to look, but just on Stack Overflow, we have 56,000 questions. Okay, so a lot of people are using ggplot. And somewhere in there will be your question, most likely. Maybe not. But then you can contribute and it can be 56,570. Okay. So not only are we going to get advantage of using other packages, doing the plotting from them and just being able to use ggplot syntax with it, we know we're not going to get lost because lots of people ask questions. People are asking questions, it usually means it's well used, and Hadley, he's answering them. He's a funny guy, Hadley, if you go look at his responses. He will often respond to himself 2 years later in a change of opinion in his own questions. Great. I think I commented about themes, and we'll talk a bit more at this end, but this is one theme which I think is really nice. Has anyone here ever heard of XKCD? Kind of a serious comment. There's a theme to make all your plots look kind of graphical like that. Right? So at the very end, make your plot and you can make it look like an XKCD comic, or whatever you need. Okay. So on top of what is a great philosophy, it's well used, and if we learn it, we should be able to use other packages too. So how does ggplot actually build a plot? This is like a description just of what we're going to do to try and make this as a ggplot here. And really what it does is it does this concept of kind of aesthetic map. So it takes your data like here, height, weight, BMI, sex, and pet, and it will map these to various components of your plot. Okay, so in this case, we're going to map, I'm not sure this actually corresponds anymore, but we could map height to the y-axis, weight to the x-axis. Maybe if you have different pets, I'm going to give you a different size of point. Doesn't really make sense. Maybe pet should be shape. But then BMI, maybe color, sex to shape in this case. Okay. So we can map various elements from our, say, data frame, our data itself, columns, to various parts of our plot, features of our plot. And in combination with scales, we want to do logarithmic scales, statistical transformations. Maybe we want to apply a smoother to our data. And geoms, geom is the type of plot we make. With this mapping and these types of additional elements, we can actually create pretty much any plot. The last part, which is kind of separate, is the themes and plot annotations. Because at the end of the plot, let's say it's data independent, we might want to change to not have array, to not have these lines. Maybe have different styles or something. Yeah. So if we look at what a ggplot actually to make a scatter plot looks like, it looks something like this and fully written out. Okay, we're not going to go into that because you don't need to do it. Got a lot of details. So in reality, to make this type of plot, the only thing we need to worry about is the aesthetic mapping. How are we going to map components from our data to components of our plot? And what type of plot we want? Do we want a scatter plot, a bar plot, box plot, a violin plot? Okay. So to make, that looks complex, but to actually make this very complex plot, it's just 2 lines, maybe 1 line. A little complex, 1 line. So here we have the ggplot function. It's not ggplot2 function, it's ggplot function. We provide the data, which is always a data frame for ggplot. And then we look at the aesthetic mappings, which we provide here with AES. And here I just tell you I'm going to map Y to the weight, X to the height, color to the sex, size to the BMI, and shape to the pet. Okay. Notice I'm not putting any of these in quotes. This is something a little strange about ggplot. We don't need to quote. These are the column names from our data frame. We don't need to quote them. We'll just put them in without these. Final thing is I say I want a point plot, and I'll do plus. Okay, so that's plus, and then I give it the type of plot. Okay, so this tells it the mapping, the actual data to use, the mapping, and then we say this, and then we get what is a very complex plot showing our various applications about it. So I'm going to do this kind of a stepwise way. You're not going to do this yourself. I just want to show you building up the components of this. So we're going to read in some data. So we'll do read delim. We'll read in this patient data cleaned. So somewhere there's an uncleaned version of this where columns are a little strange. So we're going to read that in as tab separated. Importantly, I'm going to load first the ggplot with library 2. And if I look at the class of the thing I read in, if we read anything in an R, it comes in as a data frame. I look at the dimensions. I have 100 rows and 17 columns. If I just look at that, you can see we have a mixture of values here. We have things like numeric values, dates, what looks to be integer values, decimals. And maybe we have things which are factors. Are you overweight? Are you a smoker? So we have a lot of different information. Okay. Yeah, sorry, that's what I just said. So, if we want to get an overview, obviously, I think we came across summary before. Summary does different things on different objects. If we give it a data frame, it kind of gives us an overview of what's in there. You can see we have character columns and then numeric columns. So in order, as we said, or as we've just been through, in order to produce a ggplot graph, we need a minimum of data to be used, the mapping of that data to elements of the graph, that's called our aesthetic mapping, and what type of graph we want to use, and that's the geom we want to use. So I'm going to build this up now a little differently than you'd ever do, but I just want to show you kind of the components of the actual object. So I don't actually need to provide that aesthetic mapping up front. I can just do ggplot and provide a data frame, and that passes back an object. And if I look at that object, it's the first time we've actually seen any other type of object. This is a ggplot object. This is a new type of object. We don't know how to interact with it yet, but we're going to see. If I want to, I can actually, so we've assigned that to this PC plot. That object actually contains the data now. We've just assigned it, and I can look at that in much the same way as I would look at a column in a data frame or an element of a list. I can do $. And I look at data, and we can see we have an exact copy of the data now inside the object. Okay, so already we can see it's not holding plots, it's holding the data and what we need to do to it to create our plot. This is why ggplots can often be slower, a little bit bigger. If we look, then we should have another component, which is our mapping. Okay, so I can do $mapping. It's going to look at the mapping component for my object. And it's going to say aesthetic mapping is empty. I haven't provided it. If I look at the theme, there is no theme. If I look at the layers, where the geoms would go, the types of graph, it's also empty. Just an empty list. I can now update this object, and this is nice because it's the concept that we can update this object as we go. So here I'm going to assign again our ggplot object with just the data. And now I'm going to add to this some aesthetic mapping. X is height, Y is weight. Now if I look at the mapping, I can see that something's happened. I don't know how to interact with it, but it is telling me something useful. X is height, Y is weight. Still don't have a theme. I still don't have layers. And it's really the layers which I need in order to make a plot, because there will be a default theme. So let's do that again. We'll add the data. We're going to add the aesthetics. Finally, I'm going to do plus, and I'm going to give it a type of plot. Geom point, which is basically our point plot, our scatter plot. And now if I look, I have mappings. I have no theme yet, but I do have layers, and it's a geom point. Some information there. If I then just type that in and press enter, the plot will appear in my plotting window. And it will look something like this, where you have the mappings I said. Y went to the weight, X went there. It's a point plot. We didn't need to put in a theme because there's a default theme which looks like this. I think it's theme gray. But we can create our plot that way. Blank slide. More typically, we don't actually quite define our ggplots like this. Usually, we provide an argument to our ggplot function with the same. So, previously, it's strange with ggplot objects, but you kind of add plus things to them. So first I created just a ggplot with the data, and I added the aesthetics, and then I added the type of plot I do. You can do it that way, there's nothing to stop you. But most often, this is how we do the mapping. AES. We provide to the parameter mapping, the aesthetics we want. Here, X is height, Y is weight. And then after the fact, we do plus geom. Okay. Then we have our graph. And the reason that you would often kind of define your AES here is that once you've defined it, you can actually quickly move between other types of plots. Right? So this is the same as I did first here. And I did plus geom point. The only thing I need to change to do a line plot is just plus geom line. Right? And now it's no longer a line plot. It's a point plot, it's a line plot. It's an ugly line plot, but it's a line plot. Again, I've got exactly the same input here. But if I want to do a smooth plot, I can just do plus geom smooth, and I will get smooth plots. You can see it's using some default below S smoother. Just to show you another, so we saw bar plots earlier on. Again, the syntax, hopefully you can see, is almost identical. Right here, I'm doing data with this patient's screen. Because it's a bar plot, I don't actually need to provide Y. Y will be the frequency. Here, I'm just going to do AS, that's sex. And then I'm just going to do plus a geom bar plot. Okay. So very similar syntax, almost identical syntax to create all these three different types of plots. We're going to change X to height. Don't need to change any of the syntax use here. I'm giving it the data frame again, changing the mapping just to give us a slightly different plot. But I'm going to do now geom histogram, and I'll get a histogram plot. Change that to a density with just plus geom density. Same inputs. Don't have to change any of the syntax. I'm just changing here the geom, and I'll get a density plot. I think the last two plots I'm going to show are the box plot. Remember, box plots are a little slower in ggplot. You probably won't notice unless you've done something really big. But here I'll just do plus geom box plot. The syntax at the beginning remains the same. I'm just using now X is going to be the gen plus X, Y will be the height. So I group my data from my data frame. Anyone remember why we may have female first in this plot, male second? Sorry, someone says something. It is alphabetical. But do you remember what's a little bit more, maybe? We're going to come to it in a few slides, but that's basically it. Yes, you said it. Yes, exactly. So the levels from a factor are set alphabetically, just like you said. So this is why we need to know about factors, and we need to be able to control levels. Okay, female, male. A really, really useful plot is violin. Violins also give you some idea of distribution. But again, it's the same setup as a box plot, but we just do a violin, geom violins. So really, once you've learnt this ggplot argument, give it the data, and you can know or what aesthetics you want to map. It's just as easy as doing that and then cycling through the types of plots you want to have. It's the same syntax. We don't have to learn something different for every different type of plot. So there are some nice guides here. I think the ggplot documentation is fantastic because I shouldn't have changed screen. I think if you go through their reference, maybe I'm wrong. They actually include plots. So it's not just a description in this case. They actually have the plots in their help as well, which is really, really useful. So if you want to learn more about the individual types of plots we're doing, I recommend looking in here. It tells you a lot of information, but most usefully, it gives you examples of the actual plots you make. Most of the time, you'll find an example. If you know what type of plot you want to do, you'll find an example of manipulating it the way you want to do it, somewhere in that help. I don't know what the ggplot2 guide is. I think that's a little old. It's just an example of some of the most common plots there. Okay. Now, in order to change the property on an aesthetic of a plot into a constant value, we can supply the color argument to the geom point function. So if I want to just, like I was doing with a base graphic, if I just want to change all the colors of the plot, I can just provide within the geom plot here, point here, I can just say color equals red. Notice something here. Hadley Wickham's Australian. But he actually caters for both. So every function allows for color without the U, not with the U, which I appreciate. Makes me feel at home. Okay, so here color equals red, and we can just change it. So hopefully really simple. What's really nice though is that we should be able to just not map things like color to a continual value, but actually map color or other features of our plot to elements of our data frame. So columns of our data. So we're going to recreate our point plot we saw earlier on. Very simple data, the aesthetic mapping, X is height, Y is weight, geom point. Now, if I want to, I will make a point of it here. Now, if I want to update this a little bit to something where maybe I color it by column, and here I'm going to choose sex, I can just add to my AES height, weight, and then I'm going to color equals sex, let's provide another column, a sensible column. So here it's going to be something that actually does separate my data. And then I just do plus geom point again. And it not only gives me my separated color, it also gives me a legend, right? So I get a legend telling me the column, and then I get the actual colors it used. I didn't set any default colors here. It did it for me. And it put this legend outside of my plot, which seems much more useful than the legend from base graphics. And I don't have to worry it's going to overlap points in my plot. Yes. I think we're going to come to colors later. Yeah, we do. Because I'm going to come to, yeah, we do. Hold on. Similarly, as I say, it's very easy just to update these plots and cycle through. Maybe that didn't work for me. Maybe the colors didn't work because I'm colorblind and it all came out brown. And I hadn't read later on in the slides how I can change. So I'm going to go shape. I'm going to make shape sets. With the same plot, now I have triangles for males, circles for females, and I get an updated legend. Okay, so very minimal work. That's really 2 lines. And I get already quite complex plots with legends. And that was like 6 or 7. This will be 20 lines in R. The aesthetic mappings may be set directly in the geom points function. As previously when specified in red, this can then allow for the same ggplot object to be used by different aesthetic mappings. So I don't need to set my aesthetic mappings when I was creating it this way, where I put it here inside the ggplot argument. Maybe I don't set them. I can just set them later on inside the geom point function. Okay, so that means that maybe I want to have a base ggplot object, and then I want to change and alter that a little bit more flexibly. So here I'm going to put my AES inside geom point. It's going to give me the same result: X, height, weight, color to sex. Change my use of color there between slides. Red and blue is the same plot. I can set that AES at different points, depending on really what suits the way I'm programming. And then I'm going to change color equals smokes, right? I guess that's an example of why it's useful. I don't need to update my PC plot object. I just need to update this last little bit here. I said for someone to come back at 3. Oh, well, there you go. Slide cast over. Wow, it really doesn't like being bumped at all, is it? I'm sorry. I'm excited and touched my phone. Okay, so there, just an example of, oh, we're back to the same, doesn't let me change slides, okay. So, I have the same object here, where I just create this ggplot object just containing information on the data. And then I just update the AES here within the actual type of geom I'm creating, just as it kind of fits. Here I'm going to change color to smoking. When there's not so much of a relationship between height and weight and smoking, which I find very surprising. And maybe I want to add something else. I want to add shape. I want to add sex. And now I can have color by smoking. Or I can get the advantage also of saying shape by sex. And you can see it done another clever thing where it's expanded our legends. Previously, I can also do this geom violin. Here I'm going to set x to sex, y to height. Because the x no longer really makes sense to this. And then fill. So there's a difference between fill and color. Does anyone know what that is? Exactly that. It really annoys me. I would always just fill is the middle. Color would just change this black. So we want to do fill. I guess that's something kind of clever here. It's actually across here, I guess it would be male, female, male in that order. But because I told it to fill by smokes, the y is the height, it's actually split my values. So split my values where I have a violin plot and one smoker to be smokers. It's kind of stratifying my data in multiple ways, not just female, male, but let's split them up there. And then actually we could say female smokers are a little heavier. Oh, actually, no, taller. So again, for a comprehensive list of the parameters and aesthetic mappings, so if you do question mark G on point, it will tell you what mappings are available to that particular G. Let me just get a sense of where we are. Okay. So we can rapidly update kind of the features of a plot, which things like shape, color, depending on how we actually want our plot to look, and we can update our geoms, our types of plots, just as easy. Something which I think is super useful about ggplot is also this concept of faceting. We saw that with bar plots earlier on, where we split our bar plot into two. To do that in ggplot, we can do that very easily and subset, produce several plots, which we kind of split up by a particular variable. So we have a plot for every different pet, for instance. Okay. To do that, we can use two functions, facet wrap, which is a more casual version of facet grid. But facet grid is particularly good for splitting data by two factors. It tries to place your data into a grid-like structure, your plots into a grid-like structure, so maybe different pets in the columns and then different sexes in the rows. Whereas facet wrap just goes from left to right and fills the whole thing. So we can see that in action. Here I'm going to do facet grid. So I'm going to first create my ggplot object. I'll take the patient's clean data. I'm going to map X to height, Y to weight, color to sex. I'm going to make a point plot. And once I've made that, I'm then going to run and add to this my facet grid function. And I'm going to tell it to split smokers along the rows. Remember, usually rows are first, columns are second in arguments. So we're going to do smokes by the tilde sex. And you can see we now have smokers, non-smokers, female, male. And we have these speckled strips here, which contain kind of labels. Smoker. Very little, it's actually given us a very complex plot with kind of labels for each part and different legends on the right. If we want to, we don't need to do columns and rows. We can just do columns. So here I could do facet grid. I need to do tilde And then the columns I want to separate by same setup. I'm just going to do facet grid tilde here sex, and we'll just get female and male. If I want to do it the other way around, though, I do need to set it up a little differently. I can do rows tilde, but I need to put a dot. So here I'll do facet grid sex tilde dot, and now I have female male separate. Facet wrap, I think, is useful if you just have probably many different categories. They're not going to fit necessarily into a grid. So here we're going to do facet wrap, and we'll do by smokes. And then it's just going to, it looks a lot like facet grid here. That's smoker, but if you have lots of values, it's just going to keep filling your screen left to right. Okay. Same syntax though, if I want to go by columns, I would do this. If I want to go by rows, it smokes tilde doc. Okay. What's really nice is that we can actually kind of combine our factors here to make this really complex. This is obviously a horrible and impractical plot. But if I wanted to break this up, so I want to see the combination of pet, smoker, and sex, I just do facet wrap $, then how I want to split it. And the order is kind of important. The order that defines the order based on the levels of the factors. Course, and then NA, we don't have it. But then you can see it's already made a very complex plot. If I had a bigger screen, it may be useful combining various elements of this. And we can obviously do that with facet grid. And I can make that a little less complex because now I can split by rows and columns. So here I'm going to have smokers in the rows. And then we can try and see, is there some relationship between having a pet being cats. Only for the men. Got 4 or 5 cats at home. Okay, so this is the last bit of our session today. Next session gets quite complex, so I want to leave that for the next session. But I think this is our last bit, and then we got exercises, etc. So we did discuss this earlier on, and I obviously alluded to it earlier on. This order, right, is controlled by the levels in the factor. So when we did this plot earlier on, I didn't specify who comes first, who comes second. I just did a patient screen, AES, X is sex, Y is weight, and GL box plot. The females here and males. I think the real pain about this is that, you know, a lot of people, when you first start doing this, you will try and reorder your table. And you'll try and get it in a certain order, thinking it's going to change the plot. And you'll do that over and over again until you go onto that 5,000 questions and see what someone else. So R actually decides the order based on the levels of the categorical variable. So if there are no levels, it will convert it to a factor for you internally, and then it will be in alphabetical, as we said earlier. So here I'm going to look at levels of my patient's thing. I'm going to tell you there's nothing. Right? If you were using R 5 years ago, data frames were read in with factors for character data. But in this case, now when you read in, it stays as a string. It doesn't have levels. So then what I would need to do is actually, for those things I really care about the order, I would need to force them into a factor. So what I'm going to do is take my column from patients to the sex column. I'm just going to reassign it as a factor. I'm going to give it the column back. And now I'm going to set the levels and I'm going to make it male, female. Now when I do the plot, I have a much better order. Jeez. Recording this, am I? Oh, shit. We're going to have male first. No emphasis on better. Cool. So yeah, that's how you control them, and obviously you would need to do that up front before you actually do the plots. So that's actually where we're going to leave it today, I think. We're a little over what I usually do, just over 2 hours 15. We have lots of exercises, and again, these exercises I really recommend you go through because it's not just that I give you examples. There's a lot of gotchas, things which I know you're going to do wrong. Sorry, it's no offense to anyone. You're likely to make a mistake of, not turning a factor, something into a factor. They will be in here. We have the plots there so you can see what type of plot I want you to create, but then we also have the answers on the next. So that's it for today. I did get a recording of the second session. The first session I didn't get a recording on, but I might take one of my old recordings and just stitch them together. So hang around if you want to do the exercises. If you want to leave. Why would you want to leave? But then I have intention to recording the solutions for these. I will put them on the YouTube alongside. But if you want to work through them here, please do, and me and Alan will help you through any problems. All right, I'll see you all on Friday for more plotting and some reproducible. Pleasure. Friday we're having pizza. Made the wrong way. Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, no, I get it. I think, remember him, maybe he would see it as something he would